Thank you, everybody. February 8th, 2025. This is the Columbus Free Press, Columbus, Ohio. Columbus Free Press, Salon, second Saturday of every month. So come on out during the good weather, for Columbus, that is. We usually try to do in person, but during the bad weather, we try to do this. And this gives us opportunity to expand our reach a little bit when we're talking salon and conversation. This is February 2025. So guess what happens in the shortest month of the year? We recognize the longest struggle of American history, Black world history, and the struggle for liberation and recognition of that whole human condition. We're hoping to sort of capture a little bit of that conversation with the three speakers we have today. Essam Elkorghli is a young student that is very active in trying to understand how education is used for liberation and or imperialism. And turns out probably the systems are set up for containing thought versus liberating thought. So he'll speak a little bit more on that. And then Theresa Hice-Fromille, and I'm sorry, I'm killing everybody's last name. So you guys announce and sort of give a little bit more deep understanding of where you're coming from, please. She just joined our community this past few months and year, and as a OSU professor up in geography, and is doing some very interesting research, and then is working with us on some of the Haitian reality and some research that's going on over at Springfield, Ohio, and would be very interested in hearing some of the conversations she's having, as well as other stuff. Her academia is very dynamic as well. So please share some of that as too. And Julialynen Walker is a mainstay in the Columbus local reality, very involved, and actually knows Essam. So it was sort of a nice collection. We had a nice dinner when Essam came through here in was that spring? I believe spring. I don't know. I think spring sometime. But we were speaking a little bit about possibly doing some more work together. And so this is the beginning of possibly a conversation of what could happen in the future. Black World History Month is what we're at this moment speaking about. And so we haven't really flipped coins. So I don't know, Julialynen, Miss Walker, how are you on time? And I'd like to sort of start with you, or do you want to sort of be the collapsing and curtailing all our conversation, or culling our conversation at the end?
I'm here, and I'll be glad to be the last one.
That'd be great. And you be the person that sort of helps us pull all that together. That'd be fantastic. Theresa, what about you? Or did you want to go middle second? Or you're the youngest of our connection. Well, not actually, because Essam's not even with Columbus, but you're in our community now. So but Essam is slowly and largely coming in. Go ahead, Theresa, please.
Yeah. So just introduce and kind of what.
Yeah, just introduce quickly, and then we'll get into some conversation then too. Yeah.
Sure. Well, yes, my name is Theresa. I'm really not offended with the last name. It's pronounced Fromille. Yes, this is my second year as an assistant professor at OSU in geography. My PhD is actually in sociology with emphases in critical race and ethnic studies and feminist studies from UC Santa Cruz, where I also got the majority of my political organizing training. We had 2 strikes, including 1 wildcat strike while I was at UCSC. And my research for my dissertation was in collaboration with an organization in Baltimore that teaches youth about the African diaspora kind of as an after-school program throughout the school year, and then takes them abroad to travel during the summer for about 7 to 10 days in a spot, usually connected to the Caribbean, with a large Black population. And so I've traveled with them to Cuba, Costa Rica, and Colombia, and as well as New Orleans during COVID when we couldn't go abroad. So I'm drawing kind of on that for this conversation, as well as recently working in Springfield in collaboration with the Haitian Help Center led by Vilas Dorsonville.
Thank you. Thank you. Essam, why don't you do a quick introduction and then we'll go as we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mark. Good to see you again. It's been
Yes.
roughly 3 months and a half since that
Yes.
Tanzania gathering, so it's good to see you again. But yeah, my name is Essam Elkorghli, fifth-year PhD student at the University of Illinois at the School of Education Policy, Organization, and Leadership. My undergraduate studies and master's studies have been focusing largely on teacher education and education training. And myself, I used to also teach public high schools in Minnesota, but as an international student, so I'm not from the US. And I was instructor of economics and psychology. And then I started asking questions about, why are the textbooks written as such, who funds them, and so forth. So I started to realize that if you trace a little bit the money and the ideology behind the money, you start to get to know more about who promotes certain ideals, not only on a nation state basis, but also globally. And so slowly I became more and more interested into how this global interventionist network is impacting Libya's education system after NATO came and destroyed the country in 2011, how right now the country's education system is being infiltrated by these different think tanks, NGOs, US aid, which will be one of the things I'll be speaking about today. So, and that kind of will be an example of a larger scale of interventionism, particularly that targets ideology and knowledge production. So
thank you. Yeah, I've gotten in trouble already this week talking about the USA ideas. I got in trouble, but we'll talk more about that later. We do have local not celeb, but our chief editor, Bob Fitrakis, who's gone to Libya. So I hope he can share a little bit of his experience as well. Julialynen, do you want to do a quick introduction to some folks that may not know you, and then we'll get into more conversation as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, no problem at all. Julialynen Walker, passionate Pan-Africanist. I've been involved in the Black liberation movement for a number of years in different forms, both in the United States, Africa, and the Caribbean. Currently a member of the Global Pan-African Movement, and locally am very involved in food security, food sovereignty, particularly for communities of people of color and low income.
Thank you. And a lot of her work is in Central Ohio, Columbus right now, but I see you're touching, I see you're already invited to several conferences away from, and your knowledge is growing, and hopefully we'll catch some seed to that as well across Central Ohio. Thank you again.
And also for a commercial, those who are free Tuesday can come to a lecture at the Franklin Park Conservatory on the African indigenous botanicals that are popular in the United States today. So people, don't realize that there are plants that are born in different parts of the world. They've been adopted by other places, and people think they're theirs. Like other things, people think Gaza is theirs. So yes, if you're interested in knowing about that, it's free, open to the public.
And then also you're doing a cooking class at the library. So if you're hungry, come eat. I don't know about hungry, but so Theresa, why don't you get into a little bit, our general subject. We've done this traditionally. Yeah, it's sort of pimping the month a little bit to only have this conversation. But I hope we're not just having this conversation this month, but we do highlight this conversation this month every year. And Julialynen has been part of this conversation the last few years. how, as an academic and activist, you come from activism as well, but how does an academic deal with the the conversation that African liberation at this moment? How in your experiences from your academics, you've done some work with young people, you've traveled with them internationally. You see how uh, young people's minds can grow as they understand more, and I guess old folks' minds can grow more as they know more and experience more. Go ahead, speak how you want to at this point. But the big question is how we're a community of media folk, right? We're a community of media folk trying to be contemporary journalists. That's what we're called, Columbus Institute of Contemporary Journalism, which is the Columbus Free Press. We're trying to figure out how we're writing that it resonates to a larger community, and also covering movements and academias and mind thought, intellectualism, internationally, what needs to happen. So, Theresa, go ahead and do what you were prepared for, but in the behind that, sort of think about that question of how are we to articulate Black liberation in this current day struggle? Thank you.
Ooh, okay.
I know.
Well,
As you're ready to do, though, please.
yeah, I just a couple things I was thinking about, especially today in preparation for this, and one of them is the precarious position of academics in this current moment, and where is academia going to go? We had, for those in Columbus, we had our faculty senate vote against the Salmon Chase Center, which is, effectively not doing anything. This center that's legislated by the Ohio state government to be put on campus to uplift conservative thought, and specifically what they're calling the American tradition of politics. And it's premised on the idea that, or the argument that professors currently at Ohio State are indoctrinating youth in leftist politics. And so I don't think anybody's safe. I don't think any of our jobs are safe. I don't think tenure's something to rely on. I don't think anything. Of course, there's much more vulnerable staff and adjunct professors, but even for tenure. And so I've just kind of been thinking about the university, and this also goes with Essam's work. I think we overlap a lot in this way of thinking about what the university is built on ideologically, the foundations of schooling. And so that's something that I think about in my research a lot in collaboration with the folks in Baltimore, and really trying to parse out, like, what does it mean to have education and learning differently, based on alternative frameworks of counter narratives of Black history, and that's geared towards and premised on Black liberation. And so I think that really the situation at the university today, that the university as an institution, right, that universities broadly, academia broadly, is able to be put into such a vulnerable position is because of the inherently flawed foundation on which it is premised, which is that young people aren't autonomous, that they're limited in ways, in their abilities, in ways that other parts of the population aren't, and that they can't really be trusted to decipher learning on their own. That it's even possible for a professor who sees them for 3 hours a week, right, to indoctrinate them in this way. I have plenty of conservative students. I also chuckle sideways at this argument because I went to a small state school in central Pennsylvania where I had absolutely zero leftist professors and like politically moderate at best, and I still went in and came out of that university as a hardcore commie. So it is what it is. And then that these ideas, right, that these ideas about young people and about youth are inherently flawed. And so one of the things that I look at in my research and that I'm really passionate about is how to approach youth as equitable members of society. What it means for the learning structures to know that youth do contribute in all areas of their life. They contribute in their families. Working class kids are often contributing financially to their families. And this stretches across different communities. So the psychologist Barbara Rogoff writes about this for indigenous communities in Mexico and calls it learning by pitching in, that young people learn by contributing to their families in different ways. And that's an expectation in a lot of families that are working class. But it's not just a class position. It's also an ideological position about who matters and whose contributions matter in the family and in the community. And so I'm thinking more about that as these arguments pass on. And I think that ultimately it comes down to, as a teacher today, I think we're dealing with a lot of apathy, that we're having to confront a lot of frankly not enough concern about the situations that we find ourselves in currently. And that's a lot more scary to me than having students that are super passionate in destructive ways. The not caring is, and I think that that's enabled by this idea that young people aren't contributing, that their opinions don't matter. And so I think that this is a multi-pronged issue, but I'll let somebody else take over.
No, that's good. Thanks, Theresa. That's a great shot over the bow of the role of education and the struggle of how to healthfully dispatch knowledge to people and how to think, how people to think. And some of the question about academics right now is not just the attack on academics, yes, of course, but the constitution, that the reality of academia is really becoming a upper class, well, it always has been in a lot of ways, but even more so pronounced. The student body even is upper class more than working class in a lot of ways. And if they are working class, they're working 7 jobs and they're not going to do anything extracurricular at all. So the extracurricular is surviving or taking care and learning what you're saying, learning about life. So Essam, let's sort of piggyback or talk with that conversation of struggle with education and your theoretical and your study or your access to that as well, please.
Yeah, no, I think Theresa, you brought in great framing of the issue of apathy and consciousness, both broadly defined right now as I'm saying them. But one thing that I'm in a department of education that gets tons of grants that we're taking for granted, not to pun unintended, but they were just received as we are promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are very important concepts, but they have been introduced in such a way that they have become like a dogma. And I know this is I've had numerous issues with even criticizing the people on the left with this issue, considering myself, I believe myself as a leftist, is that the lived experiences of oppressed people, even asking questions about it and so forth, have become like impossible in academic conversations, because the lived experience of the individual is truth, which is 100%. But the implications of these truths, some other people don't understand them. So they ask questions. And then when they ask questions, some people see them as invalidating the lived experiences, as opposed to trying to actually reach the level of empathy and sympathizing with the lived experiences. So the education of the left has been quite bad at having this pedagogical project of promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. They just took it for granted. And the consequences of this is that the right wing have been alienated from understanding this education and pedagogical project of equality, inclusion, and diversity, such that it got empowered to vote in fascists. And from the American perspective, is that you have right now people in the White House who are fascists, and the ones that were in the White House, the Democratic Party, they're not so fascist. But if you put a global perspective, fascism of the United States, it's from its inception. It has never stopped. It is always fascist. It's either we're going to get bombed or we're going to get bombed and sanctioned and bombed. So this is a view from the global south of US fascism. But what's interesting about this right-wing onslaught right now on this anti-diversity, anti-equity, anti-recognizing the slavery and the lingering impact of racism and anti-blackness, is that right now a complete shift is happening, which is the negation of all the projects that were promoted by diversity, equity, inclusion. The White House, they just did a press release, and I think this is presidential action executive order called Ending Radical Indoctrination in K-12 Schooling. And the way that obviously that they speak about diversity, equity, inclusion is that obviously this term gender ideology should be disparaged. There's no such thing as, fluidity of identities and so forth. So that's on the left. Sexism is not a thing. Racism and so forth is not a thing. But actually now we have to interject Americanism and patriot education. And they define patriot education as an accurate, honest, unifying, inspiring, and ennobling characterization of America's founding and foundational principles. And then also speaks about that the United States is a noble country, but it's also ennobling country. So it makes other countries as noble. I mean, if we look at, I don't like to preface things with my identity, but if somebody just looks at it from the outside and you look at what the United States is doing to its own people, the inequality that is happening in terms of income, how are the people in the United States apathetic to the plight of the Palestinians, just generally speaking, the genocide that's going on, that's being funded, the idea that, here in Champaign back in November, I attended a city council, and the city council is, essentially it's a democracy. And so you have elected people to represent the county or in the city particularly. And so there were a group of people, roughly 30 of them, they were saying the neighboring city, they had a referendum, they asked the council there, which is called Urbana, to have a referendum of the city, right, for the city to divest from the Zionist entity. And so they have gotten into the ballot and people signed it, and then people had a referenda and the city of Urbana voted for it. Now they're trying to do it in Champaign. And the people in Champaign, they said, well, we actually don't want to have a divestment because it's better to have roads, electricity, and development than to have divestment. So there are people who are putting economic imperialist interests over human lives. So they even are afraid of the people's voice. So we're not saying that should we stop investment right now? What we're saying is that let's put it on a vote so the people of Champaign can vote if they want to divest or not. If they want to be Zionist or not, they can vote it, right? So this is democracy. The council is afraid of it, right? So it's from the whole, now we're looking at it from a, just macro perspective. Maybe this quick concluding remark is that what we are seeing right now, this attack has been simmering for quite some time, but I think the left has to reorganize how it has to combat its own shortcomings that has produced this fascist hardcore rise of this techno oligarchs who are running the country right now. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Essam. Julialynen, do you want to recorrect us any which way, or are we good? You still listening good? So we should just keep on moving?
I'm still listening good. We can keep on moving.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, excuse me. 2025 has come on us fairly strong, fairly fast. Historically, though, we have a community just to the west of us that sort of exhibits historical Black liberation. Haitians, I mean, the first country in the world, at least in this hemisphere, to say, no, treating people like that's not right, and an uprising. But now, foreign policy of the U.S., Essam was sort of speaking to that, and we're going to move that a little farther along that way, has always been repression of liberation, period. If you look at all the military interventions, but if you even just get into the basic economics of how we interact with the world, if you're not with us, you're against us. That's the issue. And we have many economic and military capabilities to address that. So this time and space that we're in right now, it seems different, but is it? Or is it? So that's sort of the question. I've been challenging people in the last few weeks that they're really freaking out about this, whatever it is that we're experiencing. I'm calling them President Crash and Burn. That's what I'm calling them. And because, we've had 3 plane crashes. We've had about 4 or 5 other things go on within his administration and he's trying to crash the economy as well, because then he can get reduced interest rates on money he wants to invest in and do his. It's a challenge to really get into the agenda that he has, because he's just blasting us right now and overshadowing anything that we thought we had some folks that were able to defend civil rights and human rights in the Columbus, Ohio, and the United States. But we're seeing Springfield was an example of when local people have said, no, what you're saying is wrong. We called upon people to come and meet economic needs of our neighborhood, and they're officially represented legally here, quote unquote. No, there is no illegal humans, so that's a whole other issue. But Theresa's been doing some work, and I wanted you to maybe share a little bit about some of the research that we're getting into. She's working with us through her labor side. This is not so well. Maybe her academic training is helping us a lot, because that research that you guys, you're good at it. Yoshi is good at it. My wife, she's those folks that can do research are just for me are very important. So Theresa, can you sort of talk a little bit about the initial conversations you're having over there with Springfield, and this is within that liberation, because folks are looking for economic sanity in this world that we're confronted with. Haitians are none other than those as well. And we're now looking at regaining the visitor ban, or the bans, that happened. There's many other things that are brewing. We don't know exactly where everything's going to land, but Theresa, would you speak a little bit about where you and Madi have done some visiting and some conversations you're starting? You guys can speak better at it, but we initially organized a labor interest in trying to not go over there and just blast the labor's here, we're going to save the day, but to go over and start listening to people. So that's sort of what we've done. And Theresa's been that person, and Marty too. But please, Theresa, if you could, please.
Yeah, I think what I want to talk about regarding Springfield is more addressing maybe a little bit of what Essam, what you were mentioning with addressing shortcomings within the left. And so this participating in and being in collaboration and being in community with people who really came under intense scrutiny, national and international scrutiny, just like completely out of the blue, really, in September. This isn't, I guess it's not what I would think of or characterize as a leftist organizing space, right? Like we're in Springfield, Ohio, where a lot of the work that's being done is within faith communities. And then there is, right, a more kind of progressive leaning community activists. And so that's actually been interesting to me. It's a new space, a new organizing space to be in for me, is to really have to think through the place of religion in leftist organizing, and Christianity specifically, is what I'm I'm talking about in Springfield. I'm not really talking about many other religions. And uh, and that's something I'm seeing a lot less of. I think that it was brought up a little bit in just kind of the flippant comments about why the Democrats lost this election, as like, well, they've lost touch with the working class. And then what's kind of missing in that is that a large portion of the American working class is Christian. And not all of it is evangelical, and not all sects are the same, but that there is a need to have some sort of collaboration and cooperation between maybe like anti-religion leftists, right? If we're thinking of like pure Marxist, religion is the opiate of society sort of thinking, versus the churches that are doing a lot of on the ground work in community building, in providing and steering people towards resources, in providing spaces of safety and support for people to congregate, every week and be in community with people maybe that they would have never met. I've heard some stories about these kind of mixed congregations that are maybe the population that you would think is in Springfield, and also, getting to know Haitian people through their churches. So this for me is a huge blind spot of the left. It certainly has been in my work, and it's something that I'm really interested in. It's very different strategies being used. And I'm not sure how these strategies are talking to each other very well, or if they're talking to each other very well. But I think how I've been approaching it is trying to understand what we have in common in terms of what do we want this world to be. And that takes me to a whole different area of my research of speculative speculative Afro and African futurism is been a passion of mine for the past couple of years. And one of the reasons I got there was because I can't just think about everything that's horrible going on. I have to think and be creative and push myself to imagine the world that we actually want to live in. And we're not going to get there, I think, to one of your points, Essam, we're not going to get there by rallying behind DEI, which is another thing that was flawed from the beginning, right? DEI is just an addition to these institutions, which is why it can be swept away with, the stroke of a pen, that there was nothing changing within these institutions. There was nothing inherently changing that was combating anti-Blackness or sexism or any sort of Islamophobia or anything like that in these institutions. That DEI was an add-on and it could just as easily be removed. Nothing else had changed. And so I think what's potentially different about this moment is one is that we've been now living in a world with DEI. And so we're thinking about what do we do without it. And one thing that I'm concerned about, which also I think brings in the international element a lot too, is this this arms race we're in again. With so-called AI, but AI specifically attached to militarism. And to also ground this in Columbus, there is huge investment from the state in autonomous weapons manufacturing in Pickaway County, that is just honestly, nobody's frightened enough for me. Very few people are frightened enough for me. And so it's a lot to juggle.
Yeah, the RNL plant that's coming in, 4,000 people, soon to be down at Rickenbacker as well. So that there is that reality of corporate. Yeah, that was one thing that got me in trouble this week was talking about DEI, but also the AID concept of how we have negotiated global relations. And so, Essam, you had mentioned you wanted to maybe speak about the USAID. So why don't you go ahead, and then I don't need to give my how I got in trouble. I'll I'll write about that someday.
Well, make sure to send it to me once you write, because I'm curious what happened there. But I think what is happening with U.S. aid, it's on a personal level, I think it's a little bit funny because as you, Mark, and other comrades who were there at that round table back in November when I was in Ohio, I did mention its role in writing the Taliban textbooks back in the 80s that promoted the beheading of Soviets and communists. So it was, these textbooks that were handed to the Taliban were funded by US aid. US aid, when it went to Egypt in the late 80s, early 90s, they were saying we need to make Egyptians less, militant Islamists, and we need to, reduce that tone of, radicalism. So in Afghanistan, they fund the Islamists. In Egypt, they want to reduce it. And so they said, let's write the textbooks for you. And so when they wrote the textbooks for Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula did not belong to Egypt. It belonged to the Zionist entity, and Palestine was removed from the map. So this is what US aid's project, right? So it is tied to the United States foreign policy, as it was started back in, I think, 61 by the Congress, right? So that is its project. In recent years, the project of the United States became also, promoting liberalism as it's understood and within the context of the United States. So the advancements that are happening here in the United States should be also global. So the Americanization of the world struggle. If there's a struggle happening in the US, that means in the world, the whole world should have the same struggle. So the issues of sexism, racism, and different forms of phobias, they said we need to promote them elsewhere. So obviously they go and bomb a country and they go bomb Germany and bomb Ukraine or no, they do it through soft power. And obviously United States has this hegemony based on US dollar. They could just print the money and then they give these Eastern European countries, African countries, Asian and Latin American countries, hard currency to produce textbooks, to teach teachers, train them, give grants to professors to produce knowledge in a certain form. So this is broadly what the USAID has been doing. It is an aid entity that gives money, US dollars, which is the dominant currency in the world, in order to promote US hegemony elsewhere without the use of military force. So it largely targets ideology. Now, the project, as I said, when the issues that exist in the United States becoming globalized, meaning extend into the borders of the United States, they start to include also issues of diversity, equity, inclusion in Libya, in Hungary, in Ukraine, in Venezuela, in Cuba, you name it. And so now you start seeing, or if you start tracing the money, how it goes to NGOs, local NGOs, you might have heard 3 days ago the new White House press secretary, forgot her first name, I think Livette is the last name, but she literally said, was asked, are you freezing all of USAID's funds, right? Like, are you stopping the whole thing? Well, right now it's being reshuffled and moved under State Department. So Marco Rubio, that warmonger who hates Venezuela and Cuba adamantly. But then she said this thing where she said, $1.5 million are given to Serbia to promote DEI. $70,000 are given to Ireland to do a play that promotes trans or queer people. And the same thing in Colombia. And then there's a book publishing in Peru, $35,000 were given to them. Is this what the US taxpayer money should be going to? So now this is a right-wing attack on issues of liberalism. So this is a fascist attack on US foreign policy, how it has been articulated in the past decade or so. Now, the question is, how can we now distinguish our critique of USAID, which we all recognize as an imperialist agency of promoting Americanism or American policies across the world, from this right-wing attack? So are you saying, Essam, you don't like USAID, Trump does not like USAID, so you are the same as Trump? No, we have to be articulate more than these people are. So their attack is particularly on this agenda of DEI, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and so forth. They're not gonna be attacking investigative journalists who are promoting American hegemony in Africa. They're not gonna be contesting investigative journalists who are being funded by, USAID or other, cutouts of USAID that are producing content that defame Russia and China's interests in Africa by saying, Russia's Wagner is infiltrating Africa, causing destabilization. China is giving loans, and people get stuck in this debt trap, so they start stealing their ports and stealing their their resources. Will this stop? Absolutely not. Right now, the focus of this fascist right-wing attack on USAID is this, again, the gender ideology, diversity, equity, inclusion. But they will not, stop their interest in intervening into countries and promoting Americanism. Something that I'm still currently, thinking about and working on is called the constellation of interventionism. Is that if you're going to study just USAID and look at it, you're going to miss out on the other entities that exist. There is the National Endowment of Democracy, for example. The CIA, when it used to assassinate, kidnap, and boil people alive and behead and do all these crimes back in the 60s and 70s, the United States' reputation was kind of smeared, right, globally. So they said we need to rethink our strategy. So the National Endowment of Democracy was started in 1983 by Ronald Reagan, and then the head of it, Klessman, I believe he said that what we do right now in the 80s is the same what the CIA did, except right now it's a little bit more covert, right? So it's covered. It's not as explicit as before. So will this fascist right-wing White House right now, this regime, will it, defund National Endowment of Democracy? No, because it is promoting, again, American interests. Will it defund National Democratic Institute or International Republican Institute or the International Foundation of Electoral Systems, or any, and so on, the list goes on. No, it's not going to attack those ones because those ones are still promoting US hegemony. It's just that this attack on US aid is particular for this removing the DEI from the imperialist interventionist constellation, right? So, but then the rest is still operating, and I think we, like, as we analyze this current moment, I don't like this person. His name is Jürgen Habermas because he's like turns out to be pro-Zionist. But he said that we live in a world with this mass information that leads to exhaustion of utopian possibilities. And what he meant by it is that in the advent of mass information that's coming in and our inability to organize it and synthesize it to understand, we get exhausted and feel hopeless. And that there's like no more utopia possible. And I think this is the same strategy happened in 2017 when he took power. He signed like so many executive orders that people got lost. But just calm down and map all of these executive orders, map how they're talking about these things and distinguish how our interests are different from theirs. So this is kind of what I'm saying is that US imperialism is still operating. It's not going to be, it's removing DEI from its tentacles, but the constellation of interventionism still is operating.
Thank you. Ms. Walker, I think bring you in now would be good to bring you in. Do you have 2 or 3 questions for the speaker? If not, why don't you start where you wanted to present it?
Yes, I'm okay, because I'm not going to do speakers. I actually want to contextualize the event first. I hope I'm clear. People can hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
All right. Because I'm not sure people actually understand the occasion. All right. And you acknowledge it's Black History Month, but I really want to take us back because this was my first organizing context. Carter G. Woodson founded Negro History Week under the auspices of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in 1926. That makes this the 99th anniversary of Negro History Week. And when I was growing up, my father was very involved in the association, and we had study groups. That's where my first example of a study group was under the association. And Negro History Week was an opportunity for us to learn, and as I said, that it was to focus the attention of the Negro community and the American people as a whole on the lived and the life and experiences of the Negro people, to focus the attention. What's also significant for us is that this month, the theme is African Americans and labor. And it's also the 100th anniversary of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which was formed because of the discriminatory behavior of the labor movement. So I want to make sure that we understand that this discussion is in the context of a history and a practice of struggle that is 100 years old, 99. Okay. So within that, it was very good to hear the comments from Theresa and Essam. Theresa, and both talking about first the academy and the changes now in the academy and the perception of who is the learner and what is the role of the teacher in interacting with the learner and what assumptions are made about how the academy functions. So part of our discussion when we focus is not only understanding that, but understanding within the context of that, what is the lived experience of people of color? And what does that mean? And so Essam, in terms of, coming back and saying, yes, there's this question of apathy and consciousness. And I would add to that there's also a certain level of willful denial. Somehow the apathy doesn't get it for me. I think there's apathy, but I think there's willful denial. And I think if we don't recognize that, we will really fail to get at the roots of some of these issues. Okay, it was a discussion today. The woman was like, I keep saying and I keep getting cussed out, and I'm just going to keep saying and I'm going to keep getting cussed out. And that may be part of what the role that some of us will have to undertake. Theresa also mentioned this question of interacting in Springfield with faith-based communities. And it highlighted for me the need for us to sit down and say, in our organizing, who are we missing? In our organizing, have we established patterns of behavior, patterns of action that unconsciously omit certain communities? And if so, what do we do to ameliorate that or to redress that and do it effectively? Finally, thank you, Essam, for that discussion around USAID. And I just want to also highlight is that the budget, is less than the 1%. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to go after if you really want to talk about corruption, the loans that Elon Musk has received is more than the budget of USAID. Okay, so we really want to talk about corruption and mismanagement of funds. There are a number of other agencies that they can focus on rather than go after USAID. But thank you for the analysis of its role actually in the promotion of a right-wing ideology in the context of doing good. And as one who's been a contractor for USAID, we have definitely struggled against, representing that full spectrum of interest. And then finally, someone put in the chat the role of white women in DEI. And again, this is part of that, the need for us to consistently bring information to the table. And I just find myself, I said, I try not to be reactive, because even though I, looked at Project 2025, even though you have a sense of what's coming, the reality of it is just so horrendous. Today, I think he proposed monies be given to resettlement for South African Afrikaners. I mean, it just never ceases to amaze me. But the bottom line is being proactive with our knowledge. And so people understand that DEI in many respects has benefited white Americans who were developmentally delayed more than African Americans. And certainly white women have benefited significantly. The discussion here in terms of gender is they know it, but they really would prefer not, because they understand that that's benefited to a certain extent, largely, college educated or college bound or progressive women. And so therefore, if you are really more interested in keeping women at home, well, they barefoot and pregnant, right? Then it's not an issue. And we can have a whole discussion of eugenics and birth rate and the demographics next time. Okay, so I'll stop there and turn it back to Mark.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. That's a good historical contextualization for us, and then also a great application of that you were listening to these young folks. That was very important for us to understand. We need to listen to the young folks that are doing their thing, and as well as bring in the history. Speaking of some of the conversation, Theresa, you mentioned it, that a lot of folks, a woman I work with always said, why do we always have to have dead people up on the wall? Can we not have some of our live heroes up on the wall? So that's one thing I for sure want us to always remember, that we need to honor the liberationists, the liberators, the leaders of a liberation movement while they're here as well. So to that point, Tennessee Coates, his new book, The Message, again, I keep going back to that the last 3-4 months about his book, this new book about who controls the narrative is basically the discussion. And as we are a community of journalists, so we're contemporary journalists, hopefully better than the investigative journalists that Essam talked about, but hopefully some other brand of that. How can we create a narrative that, historically we're sitting here. This is the context that we're in. and we're moving that weight, or liberating that liberation forward. As a story, I think stories are very important, and I think more and more people are realizing that the power in organizing is getting to those stories. But does anyone have any experience on that, or want to share that with the three? And then I'm seeing some folks asking about the event that you spoke of, Ms. Walker, and that is Tuesday at 6 at the Wells Barn, just so everybody knows. And many people are bouncing off the DEI conversation on a lot of different things. And for me, that was a corporate greenwashing in a lot of ways, has always been, but it has its benefits as well. So I'm getting myself in trouble when I start speaking about things. And I do have to, as being a white man, cis at that, I have to walk my walk as I can. But there are times that we need to speak and rock the boat sometimes, and maybe be threatened with, well, you're talking crazy type stuff. USAID, Essam, you weren't too far off of where I was heading with my discussion with some folks this week. But there, I said the baby is being thrown out with the bathwater in this one. And they kept on talking about how I was equating the Trumpism, the President Crash, and his work with what we were talking about. I was trying to move towards liberation. And I was like, no, that's totally opposite of what I was saying. That's totally opposite. And it's too complicated to get into at this point. But anybody have any thoughts on the narrative and how do we capture that narrative? Yeah, Ms. Walker, you spoke it very eloquently, historically, and then matching it with what they were saying. But
okay,
the
briefly.
right wing is very good at creating a narrative. We're not.
Yeah, no. Let me give it let me reference a couple of recent incidents. Okay, one thing that I see happening when we go with Springfield.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the statement came out, the Haitians are eating people's pets. And just in and of itself, it's just such a preposterous statement. But people picked it up, and it got carried on, and then some additions, and then people said, no, it's not happening, and people explained what was happening, and still Trump and Vance said, no, that's what's happening, or even if it's not happening, people need to think it's happening. I actually heard that at one point. And now the plane crash, and in DC, and the comment was, "Oh, it's because the plane crashed because of DEI." And people were like, "Well, how do you know that?" And he said, "Oh, because I have common sense." Okay, and so I call that the dog whistle. Something happens, he sets it out. Okay, so now Gaza. The Gaza was they're going to buy Gaza, and it's been bombed out. Therefore, it's not livable. And the people whose land it is don't have enough sense to actually build it back up. So they should go someplace else, and he will come in and build it up and make it this resort area that, of course, will be for Europeans.
Did he say he was going to buy it? I don't even think he said he was going to buy it.
No, well, it's all, but it's just, I just want to get to the pattern.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, where he says something utterly preposterous. We respond with, a sense of protest and outrage. He reaffirms, he maneuvers it slightly, and then he moves on to another topic, but he somehow carries it along with him. Okay, because he'll go back, because remember, and then he'll keep going. Yeah. And so part of the discussion for me is, do we respond with outrage? We know it's coming. We don't know quite what form it's going to take, but we know tomorrow there's going to be something else. So how do we not respond with outrage, but rather respond with the facts, the narrative, and really build that body of knowledge? Because maybe there are people who really don't know that Haitians don't eat cats. You know, it may be that people will think, oh, well, we know the Chinese eat dogs, so Haitians eat cats. We don't know quite what's in people's heads. So how do we put this out here to say this doesn't make any sense? Or the whole traffic controller, you know, there's a pattern of employment, you know, for traffic controllers that is historic for at least the last 10, 15 years, that has absolutely, you know, nothing to do with this process. So how do we actually bring that discussion to bear and keep that discussion in the forefront? So, you know, as these dog whistles come out, you know, for me, it is, you know, just reaffirming the reality and trying keeping that before people rather than the nonsense.
Thank you. Yeah, the air traffic controllers were noticed the day before, put on notice a day before the first accident that they were all going to be laid off, or there was some kind of job action imminent. So how does that put someone's brain in focus on their job? There's you can sort of, the story needs to be told in a way that we understand historic context and not keep responding to the craziness, if we call it crazy, whatever it is. Essam was talking about it being like, he didn't say this, but it's like a fire hose that you're trying to drink out of a cup of water, and you're not able to do that. All that stuff's coming at you so fast, but we have to figure out that which gives us hydration, I think, in a lot of ways. Yeah, yes, go ahead, please.
If I may,
Excuse me, just for 2 seconds. It is 8:03 p.m. Columbus time. We do sort of start slowing the conversation down and then jumping into more informal conversation. But let's finish up 5, 10, 4 minutes, a little bit more. And then if folks need to leave, they can. Thank you, Essam. Go ahead.
yeah, no, thanks clarifying what time we end. But I think there's something very interesting about the articulation, is that they attacked, obviously, DEI as the thing when it comes to this flight incident, the crash, right? And they only attacked the civilian aspect of the crash. They did not touch the fact that there's a military helicopter in the way. And this is, they don't talk about also DEI inside the military, right? So we know that there is DEI also inside the military happening for the past couple of years, right? But just the articulation is that the right wing neoconservatives right now in power, they're just blaming everything on DEI, but only the civilian part, because they don't dare to touch the military because it's something almost sacred, right? You, I think, bring very important questions. How can we create a narrative that puts liberation forward? And I think my conversations with Gregory might seem like now repetitive a little bit, but I think there is an important thing that we, as we speak and put our ideas forward, is that we have to make sure that nothing that we say, do, organize overlaps with imperialist talking points, with imperialist thoughts, with imperialist narratives, and so forth. And I give you cases. For example, when right now there is war, or has been a war, ongoing war for many, many years in Eastern Congo. Recently, Rwanda sent its troops, which are backed by the United States, UAE, Britain, and Qatari intelligence, and so forth, to take over parts of Congo, which has rare earth minerals that are necessary for this technological development that the West needs, right? So this is a little bit historic background. How does the West speak about this? Oh, is this, Africa is in a vortex of violence. It's always killing each other. Africa needs to be saved. They're sick with that. No, they said, if you want to understand what is happening in Congo, it is Rwanda doing a Putin in Congo. Rwanda doing a Putin in Congo. So Rwanda did a special military operation to liberate the people of Eastern Congo in order to prevent them from being oppressed. Allegedly, this is what Putin is doing in eastern Ukraine to prevent the Ukrainians from oppressing the Russians, according to one famous newspaper called Foreign Policy. So now, surprisingly, when I sent it to fellow African students here who come from Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, you name it, they said, yeah, what's wrong with this article? This is true. You have a sovereign country, Congo, being attacked by Rwandan-backed forces. You have a sovereign country, Ukraine, being attacked by Russia. But then I told them, explain to me, why is the West is supporting Rwanda and why is the West supporting Ukraine? Why is NATO countries supporting Rwanda? And if you watch soccer, you see like Arsenal, the British Premier League, they have Visit Rwanda campaign. They're whitewashing its history and so forth. So as we try to analyze the context of any geopolitical conflict, we should always negate the imperialist narrative. So if we go into that, we realize that what Rwanda is saying, that they're coming to liberate the minorities in Eastern Congo, which actually is part of their narrative, they're taking over minerals and they're extracting the minerals there to give them to Tanzania and Uganda's ports. And then they will go to UAE, and UAE manages the transfer of those rare minerals. So that is not being said anywhere in Western media. So I think this is where we have to outsmart imperialists in how we push forward our own narratives that have to be equally or even more aggressive than the imperialist narratives and how they speak about liberation movements and so forth. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Theresa, do you have any closing? It is getting time to shut down. And then Julialynen will let you close us off. There are some announcements. In the chat. Suzanne will, Suzanne will collect a lot of this stuff. So if you have any resources that you're wanting to share, throw them into the chat, please. And our See What Happened At a report that Suzanne puts out after the Free Press Salon every month. And this is February 8th, 2026 Salon on the Black world struggle for liberation. We're looking at Pan-Africanism. We're looking at mutual aid and immigration issues, and many other facets of what that actually means. So, Suzanne, do you have any thing that may help you do that recollection of tonight that you want to mention now? And then Connie has put in, and I don't know if Connie can speak to tomorrow or Tuesday's event with Reverend Wagner. That'd be great. Suzanne?
Yeah, people want to put details about events that maybe we don't even get to talk about. I will include them in the email that comes out after this. But the email gets sent to the people that are on the Columbus Free Press email list. And some people on this may not be on that. And I also posted up on the Free Press website as kind of an article, and then I share it on Facebook. So those would be the ways to find that report after the event.
And you'll be amazed that this salon has these salons have legs that exist many after that. Connie, are you ready to speak? Or Theresa, I see you unmuted. So if you want to say anything, please.
I hope I'm not repeating myself. I don't know if I'd said this, but I think your comment, Ms. Walker, about the feeling the need to react, and then also the our need to stay focused on anti-imperialism is reminding me. Actually, I wanted to bring in a Haitian scholar, Michel Trouillot, who I teach in both of my current classes in different ways. And he talks about, one of his books is really talking about modernity. The major debate going on when he was writing in anthropology was, are these communities that we've historically thought of as primitive, were they actually practicing modern ideas like democracy and liberation? And of course we look to Haiti for that, right? For being the first successful slave rebellion, largest on the largest scale. And he says we have to stop engaging in this debate. We have to change the terms of the debate. That it's so much less important about whether African descended communities were modern. We're actually practicing having these modern practices. And it's so much more important to think through why modernity is the standard through which we judge people, or that we judge their humanity or their intelligence. And so I'm reminded of this for this conversation of changing the terms of the debate you know, clinging to these ideas of DEI and stuff, and wanting to turn to what are the things that are actually going to get us to liberation. And so to draw on your question about like giving people their flowers while they're still here, right? I think the underappreciated movement leaders who aren't really public, my brother complains about this to me a lot of like, who are our leaders? Where are our leaders? I think that in a lot of ways right now, in this really difficult moment where our present is so unstable that it makes it difficult to imagine a future where we're coming out of this, on top of, you know, actual things that we may not come out of, like climate change, that those leaders are actually our artists who are able to do that really creative work that we're struggling to do right now. And the artists who are building and creating things to help us get there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the cultural work is so critical, and we need to honor it as much as we can, but push them as well. And they get pretty comfortable in their corporate worlds, you know, too, and some of them. And we need to hopefully Kendrick says something tomorrow night that sort of shakes the world a little bit. Who knows? We don't know. You know, as long as he's not just shouting out Drake, but you know, something else, you know, hopefully, we'll see. Thank you again, everyone, for I mean, I'm getting a lot of good announcements that we're going to be able to post out. If anyone wants to articulate them, I see Nevin's out here. He's down in Mexico. So we've done our reach here. We've achieved our reality that the electronic salon does make sense sometimes, and where we can expand our community. Like if we're just having a backyard grill out, you know, we only get the 30, 40, 50 people that show up for that. But here we get, you know, 30, 40, 50, but our expansion of our geography is a lot larger. And
Mark, may I make one more brief comment?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You were supposed to end up anyway, so yes.
So this is the conclusion? Okay.
Yes.
You know, recently after the last election, a number of people said to me, either individual or in groups or in writings, where are the protests? Because last time there were all these protests. People were in the streets. You know,
took the airport.
Yes, everyone was, you know, and people were like, where are the pride? And then someone said, yeah, and where are the white women? I said, oh, you haven't seen the blue bracelets? And people were like, what are you talking about? I was like, rather than taking to the streets, they were wearing blue bracelets of allyship. And that was, you know, representative of the collaboration and support. And it is said to me in many ways, people were simply exhausted. Having coming out of the struggles around the assassination of Black men throughout the United States, you know, coming out of the COVID struggles, coming out of the climate struggles, you know, people were just exhausted this time around. And there was also some disappointment. And even though, I mean, they had 4 years to do Project 2025, it was released. It was available to the president. In the president, you could download it, you get a book, you know, it was there. I was part of a study group here in Columbus that went through it. So why wasn't the Democratic Party, you know, prepared to address what was readily available? Okay, and so now, you know, earlier you said, what can we do as journalists? I saw very little about the 50-51. So for those of you who aren't sure, it was 50 states, 50 demonstrations on one day. It was on Wednesday, and from everything that I've been able to glean, there were 50 states, demonstrations in 50 states. Hopefully now, this will be taken forward so that every month there would be 50, 51, or every other month, but focused around particular issues so that we actually have it as an educational forum in addition to a demonstration of a fight back. Okay. But then finally, next year, and this has already been touted by the federal government, is the 250th anniversary of the recognition of the founding of the United States. And in many respects, I see it already being projected as this glorification of whiteness, as particularly white maleness. And I think it's really important that we begin now to ensure that the Native American experience is part of this discussion. And certainly there's a less evident experience in terms of the presence of Africans throughout the Americas, as part of this discussion. But definitely, the 250 celebration cannot, be allowed to go forward without some recognition and respect, given afforded to Native Americans. So, having said that, thank you for allowing me to be part of this process. I've enjoyed the interaction. Theresa, Essam, we got to get together and, do something else. There's more to be done always. Good always to see folks, Suzanne and Bob. And, thanks very much again.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Ms. Walker. That's great. And your work in Bronzeville, continue, please. And the growing season begins soon. We're looking at some value-added product production. So I need to talk a little bit more with you about that. And then your cooperative grocery store that's coming together, hopefully the East Side. We can pull something together that very soon. You went to Detroit to check that out. There's a lot of good projects that people are getting into that we need to really give recognition to and really understand the empower of local over control. Think globally but act locally, as they always say. The Canopy, Yoshe is a big promoter of Canopy, but Canopy has highlighted this month the soundtrack of a coup d'etat, and I encourage folks to maybe rewatch that if you haven't watched it before. But the soundtrack of a coup d'etat is about Congo, since Essam mentioned Congo, and the CIA and USAID's efforts and military as well. Belgian, can't let out the Belgians. Impact on killing Lumumba, Patrice Lumumba, and many other leaders that were curtailed through that whole struggle for liberation. So it's a great movie. Simply Living has a movie up at the Studio 35. So we're mentioning art, but also movies are a great way to tell stories. And we have many good local filmmakers and access to theaters that want to show those kind of movies. Wexner, Gateway are two local theaters that just organize. So let's support them, support those workers, and make sure that those newly organized, meaning labor, structures are honored by local people showing up to those things. Again, thank you, Columbus Free Press. This February 8th, 2026, or 26, my God, we're jumping a world. 2025, Columbus Free Press, Salon. We'll see you back next month, March. We're looking at some issues. If you have any that you'd like to talk me or Suzanne. And then April will be WGRN's anniversary. We usually do an Earth Day kind of thing in April. And then we'll kick back to some on-site kind of activities during the summer, hopefully. We're still trying to figure that out. But if anybody has any help on that, please talk to Suzanne or me or anybody that is in the planning section, the board. And then I do want to, we do have the board member here, which is the president, and he's calling in or is coming from Thailand. So he's definitely one of the farther ones that have come in. So Pete had mentioned some stuff in the chat, so I'd like him to have maybe the last final word as our president of the board. Thank you, Pete, if you can. I don't know if you were on and then you might have gone back to sleep. I don't know. But thank you again, everybody. May the rest of the month go well. Try to touch base. There's great films up at Wexner for the Restoration Film Festival that's going on. Many good African flicks up there. All across the city, the libraries are doing things in recognition of this month. Ms. Walker is part of several of those. So stop by and you'll probably see her show up somewhere. You'll see her in person. Again, next Tuesday at the Conservatory, Franklin Park Conservatory, Tuesday at the barn. If you've never been to the barn, it's a great place to come and check it out. Great parking, no problem parking, just come on out. It's on the east side of town, Franklin Park. And Pete, looks like you've unmiked, so go ahead, please.
Somebody asked me to unmic. I didn't really have anything to say.
Oh, I'm just saying the Prez has come on from Thailand and you'd posted some things in the chat. So if you'd like to give the final shout out, maybe encourage people to write for the Free Press or whatever you want to do.
Well, it was a good salon this tonight, and I'm glad I got to join it. But yeah, I was just commenting on USAID because I'm not sure that you never know what Trump is thinking, but one possibility is he hates the FBI and he hates the CIA, and so by cutting off funding to USAID, he's trying to eliminate some CIA programs. Maybe. I would be giving him way too much credit for actually having a thought. But that part of the CIA that does those kind of activities, I'm more than happy that gets cut out of the world.
That's a people.
Go ahead, Bob.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, when I was in Yugoslavia some 30 years ago or so, I was approached by the interpreter for Jimmy Carter, who was thought to be with the CIA. And he said I could have a scholarship anywhere in the United States at any college. And I asked him what I needed to do for it. And he said, well, just meet with the USAID director in Sarajevo, once a week, and the other USAID people. That's all you got to do is tell them what the students are thinking and what people are thinking on the campuses. So it's hard to come up with a narrative when you know how deeply involved USAID has been with particularly the CIA.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, that's why I don't understand why the conservative legislators are trying to shut down academics, because actually that's the easiest way to glean information. Sorry, historically it was the easiest way that they could just go and do their thing. Again, Steve Caruso, thank you for your technological support on this salon. As always, you are the man of gold and touch. Suzanne and everybody, thank you. The board of the Columbus Institute of Contemporary Journalism, which is the Columbus Free Press, does encourage folks to write. So if anybody's got some things burning in their brains, come on, we need to put it on paper, well, digitally, however you do it nowadays. We'll even take pictures, we'll take handwriting, we'll do it all.
Brian Curtis covered the 50-51. I don't know if you saw that in the chat.
Yes, I saw him down there taking some good pictures. Yeah, I saw him down there. That was great. Yeah, that 50-51, that, it was done, just not to minimize it at all, but it was a marketing effort by this young man to prove that his marketing capability was true, and it proved to be very true. That there was an energy that was there. There was probably 800 people down at the State House in Columbus.
And by the way, Bob wanted to add that
Yeah, please go
I
ahead.
didn't take them up on their offer to buy me.
just to let people know, he said no.
For the record.
No, I knew they didn't buy you because you changed your opinion on Yugoslavia. There for you were there for a little bit with them, and then we had to talk to you a little bit, and you changed your mind. So I knew they didn't buy you out. I knew they didn't buy you out. Well, thank you again, everybody. Continue to be a good community. We'll see you in March. Right now, I'm forgetting the initial embers of what we're trying to do in March, but it'll probably be something good.
We'll talk.
It'll be something good. We're trying to be good. The Free Press is trying to be on the front cutting edge of what we're trying to do as an industry in Central Ohio. So again, Free Press does have writing capabilities. We do have 2 radio stations accessed, so WGRN and WCRS, and the podcasts, many other things that can project that narrative that we're trying to say that we need to create. So please help us create that. Greg's books on Serbia, and then continual work on Korean Peninsula, where we do have very valuable writers and intellects in Columbus, Ohio, that we do need to remember that we are not alone. Never be despaired. Always liberation is what we're about. Yes, we're going to have fallen soldiers along the way. But yes, Stephen, go ahead, please.
Oh.
And
yeah. Evan Sliders is here. He's doing Spanish translations for the Free Press, so not every article getting translated. He's got a few of his own. And also on Monday, we're having Greg Palast on. Grassroots election protection with Harvey Wasserman. So that site is grassrootsep.org, and there's a menu item for upcoming Salon that'll be there. I'll try to put it in the chat here. And that's all I got. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you. And yeah, Nevin, you Mexico going well. So we'll cut this. We'll probably cut the recording, and then if anyone needs to leave, go ahead. And then you want to stay around, we'll probably just shoot the breeze a little bit on some things. And once recording is off, you can use vernacular if you like to, and whatever you want to do. So if you want to say what? Trump, whatever you want to say, do your thing. But please go ahead. Anyone that wants to say anything, go ahead. And Theresa, Essam, and Ms. Walker, thank you so much for your contributions to this conversation. It was a great way to honor this month for the Free Press, and hopefully we do many more things like this throughout the world and throughout the year. Again, thank you again. And Ms. Walker, you always give us that historical context, that good grip that keeps my feet on the ground as much as I can be, and a little bit more into the ground than on the ground. We're trying to get deep and grow some good stuff on the east side of Columbus. So there we go. So